Okay, gang, here it is, the long-awaited, very much anticipated part two of the interview with Melanie Kingdon. Here we go. So,
Hi.
hey, Melanie, thanks for being back here with part two of your interview. Thank you again for taking out your time again for part two. Really appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me back, Tammy. I'm really excited to be here to continue our conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So now, okay, now part two. Every time I see you and every time you're around, just the way that you express yourself is you are just, you are seen in a crowd, at least for me. So your expressions and how and just how you live and how you present yourself and everything like that. So how do you choose to express yourself? Through style, art, energy. I know you have a lot of energy, fashion, all of that.
Sometimes I wish I had a little less energy and could like tone it down, but I just like have to be, spreading myself as thin as can be everywhere I go. But no, but for a real answer, fashion is super important to me. Fashion has always been a key element of how I express myself, and that continues through to today. And I think that the way that I express myself can't really be honed down to a single description. Like if I were to have my way, I would be a some kind of changeling, a shapeshifter. I mean, I think it's probably easy to see that between now and the last time we spoke, my self-expression has shifted dramatically, and that's just part of the day-to-day of being me. um I think that if I were to try to describe it, there is always strong elements of color. I really love color. I know you would never guess. You would never guess. Um, I express that a lot through my hair. I think the last time I saw you, I had very light pink hair, and
Hmm.
now I'm in like the sunset kind of like area with the purples and the bright pinks.
It's autumnal.
So yeah, yes, I was going for like sort of autumnal evening, early evening sunset vibes.
Yes.
But all of that is to say, typically a little bit alternative, a little punky, a little gothy, but with a polished sort of edge.
Mm,
So that's the
yeah,
kind of like vibe that I try to strike.
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Now when you are out and about and with your style and your energy and everything, um, how do you handle moments, and we all have these moments when people make assumptions about you?
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought about this a lot because I mean, we were just talking about energy, but even somebody like me who's exuberant and going all the time has limits. And I think that knowing how to react to other people's assumptions about you, at least for me, has been very much guided by how I decide to use that energy. How do I tap into the energy that it takes to correct or maybe confirm assumptions. So I think it's good for me to start off by saying here that the look that I have, certain assumptions are fair to be made. I'm intentionally sending some signals about myself with the way that I present myself. I fit into certain groups, and I don't think that I'm not insulted when people take that the right way. There are certain political beliefs and social beliefs that come with having bright purple hair and rainbow glasses. And I am not ashamed or shy to be associated with those types of assumptions. That being said, there are also assumptions about my gender and ways that I feel that might not be accurate. And at that point, I have to make a decision about whether or not I want to correct the narrative. Um, so when I make that decision, it could be guided by two considerations. One, I care about the person in front of me who's making this misguided assumption. And so, because I want to invest in that relationship,
Mm.
I'm going to spend the time with them to lovingly and generously correct them and say, actually, no, that's not how I feel. That assumption is not correct. Or it may not be about that immediate person. It could be by the setting and surrounding that we have. So if I decide to correct somebody, it could be because I'm cognizant that there are others around who could potentially benefit from hearing that correction. So there are two layers there. But I always try to be cognizant of protecting my own core energy. You don't want to give yourself sort of a compassion or empathy fatigue when you're doing that kind of work. And not everybody feels safe doing that kind of work around their own identity because it's very easy to get defensive and feel personally attacked. So I try to ask myself, how much good am I actually going to do here? Am I going to change minds? Am I going to add to this person's perceptions? Or am I in a situation where this is a person who I've dealt with before and that they're a black hole for my energy? And in those instances, I might decide, you know what you think of me is none of my business.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that's great, because we all know, and this goes for everyone, every human being, is that a lot of times it takes so much energy just to wake up in the morning, that for us to pick our battles and decide where are we going to spend the energy of our day and of our, how we live and everything, that, yeah, there are people that you want to give grace to. You
yeah,
want to give them the grace and you want to help them
totally.
to understand and everything. And there are definitely people around that you want to help. But then what we have to do as a community is we also have to, that there are times to pound our fist and rah, rah, rah. But then there are also times to sit back and say, but wait a second, do I really need to, in
Yeah,
this situation? Is my, is the energy that I'm expending going to get anywhere with this
yeah,
person?
yeah.
And it's a shame to think like that, but unfortunately, we have to.
No, it's completely valid. And I think that setting and time and place are crucial elements of this. Like when it comes to correcting, for example, my mother, and I don't recall whether or not we got into this in our last conversation, but I think I've mentioned to you before that my mother is in her 70s and she has two non-binary children, and the two of us are different kinds of non-binary, where my younger sibling feels like they are a gender without any gender. I
Hmm.
have an abundance of gender. I have too much gender. And to be frank with you, she doesn't get it. She does not really understand it. And there's come a time in our conversations where both elements of that grace, both deciding to engage and deciding not to engage, have embodied that sort of tone of grace that you're talking about. Sometimes it's just enough for me to know that, and what she's and believe that what she's explicitly expressed to us is, I will love you no matter what, and I'm happy and thrilled that you're figuring out your human experience. So I have to take her at her word on that. And I think that there's a grace in giving her some leeway and understanding that she's on her journey and that we have both thought about our own genders a lot more than she ever has.
Hmm.
Um, and on the flip side, there are moments where the way that she regards us, or me in particular, I can only really speak for myself, impacts how other people in our community regard us. So, for example, if we're going to temple together, we're Jewish. So, if she misgenders me in a new community, I pull her to the side and I say, I understand that this is really hard for you, but it's very important to me to make the correct first impression on this new group of people or this new community. And in those moments, I want to meet her where she is. I want to extend that grace to her.
Hmm.
And I'm going to take the time to help her along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely can relate to that. I mean, my mother, she's 89 years old. And I mean, yeah, there are plenty of times where she's still calls me Todd, or, he, him, stuff like that. I know it's not malicious in any way whatsoever. She
Yeah.
always says how proud she is of me and everything. And it's funny, even with some of her circle of friends, when she does that, they will correct her.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So, and I mean, I just take it as okay, because please, there have been times when she'll call me Trapper, the dog's name. So,
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
so, and the way that I think about it is, yeah, I'm, definitely her child, and it is something that a parent has to get used to. There is always
Yeah.
we go through our transition, but a lot of times we forget that our parents, our family, our friends, they have to go through their transition with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I
Totally.
definitely get that. I definitely get that. Now, with that, because I facilitate a support group, and we have some youth in the support group, and especially around this time of year, with families and gatherings and things like that. Um, what advice would you give to somebody who's still trying to figure out who they are, and especially like this navigating family and all of that stuff?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So first off, I just want to sort of frame what I'm about to say eh, with a little bit of a parable, which is that, at every major intersection of humanity and technology and development, there is a moral um, outcry or concern about, like, are the kids okay, like, are they going to be okay? And I like to think about the invention of the pen back in ancient times, that when the because previously writing had been sort of confined to a very elite group of people who were given chisels and
Mm-hmm.
stone blocks. It was not easy to just write things down, and all of a sudden papyrus and quills were becoming a something that the proletariat could access. And it was worried that this privilege would lead to a dulling of the minds
Mm,
of the next generation of youth, that they would stop being able to remember things because they would just be able to write them down. So, why do you need to remember anything if you could just write it down? And
right.
it turns out now we know that writing things down actually helps with your memory. But the point is that, I think that there can be a propensity for worrying overly much about the kids. And my experience with youth, particularly like teenagers, the kids who are by and large starting to figure some of this stuff out when it comes to queer identity, is that they actually have a really clear moral clarity, and this incredible exuberance and passion for what is right and what is just. And so probably what I would do before offering any advice to them is I would want to listen to them and ask them what they think of the world around them, what they think of the unique challenges that their generation faces, and what they feel like they need help with.
Mm,
So that would be first, is just to listen, ask them what they think is really important in the large scale of the world, and also the small scale of their own world and school and neighborhood.
mm,
What do they feel like is really affecting those around them? So that's number one. But if we're talking just in terms of like advice to queer youth, of coming of age, um, I would reflect back on a story of my own coming out, which is that one of the first people who I came out to was my rabbi. And I was 12 years old. And at that time, it had nothing to do with my gender identity. It was about my sexuality, because I knew that I was attracted to, the boys and girls around me. And I wasn't really sure what that was going to mean for me. And so I went to my rabbi and I told him, I don't know if I can do my bat mitzvah. I think I like boys and girls.
oh.
So does that preclude me from participating in all of this?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, um, well, first off, um, do you feel like you could talk to your parents about this? Do you feel safe talking to them? And he encouraged me to, to share with them if I felt safe doing so. And he told me that he knew that my parents only had my safety at heart. And so it's really important to have adults who you can talk to about these things and to find a safe adult, because as you're figuring your way out through relationships and things, it helps to have some perspective about what is and isn't safe and good and kind, and normal in a
Yeah.
relationship. So that was
Wow.
number one. Yeah, yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
And then number two, he said that everyone around you is asking and answering some version of those same feelings. Everybody's trying to figure out who they're attracted to right now. And he said, so, these are normal feelings that you're having, and you're going to meet all kinds of people who have all kinds of normal feelings. The only piece of advice he gave me was that it is a lot easier to put on a label than to take it off. And so to take my
Mm.
time in deciding what I decided to call myself. And I would pass that same advice on to today's youth. You don't have to, and I know it's so hard. It's so hard to be patient when you're that age, because you only have, the span of time that you're aware of. And there's that like incredible urgency that you feel about
Mm-hmm.
everything. Like sometimes I miss feeling that incredible urgency, but it's okay to read a lot. You're inheriting an entire community, a
Mm.
wealth of knowledge, and it really is a type of generational wealth, the knowledge that there is. You can connect with people online, read the literature. There's so much LGBTQ literature out there. And you will encounter terminology that helps you. You will encounter stories that help you to identify the feelings that you're having and then accurately describe them. So take your time, read voraciously, connect with others, and you will figure it out. You
Mm.
will. So that would be the advice, my
Yeah.
very long winded advice.
No, that's great. That's great. And I could definitely see where a lot of that also fits into people that have transitioned later in life. They have, because I know with me, I mean, I started my transition back in 2017. So I was 53 years old, already with a life,
Yeah.
with a family, a wife, a daughter, like that whole thing. So for 50 years, I've been living as, as one, but now I'm changing. So how do I, and that was my thing. You know, where do I actually fit in? Which way?
Yeah.
Because everything has been so ingrained for 50 years. Then all of a sudden now, and to learn all of the new things and to learn right terminology, to learn labels, to learn experiences, other people's experiences, because now later in life, I mean, the sphere of influence is so much larger, so coming out
Totally.
to so many more people, it was a lot of
Were
prayer
you
went
can
into
I
that.
can I ask you a little bit more about that?
Sure.
Um, you know, how much do you feel like your path was guided by fear, and how much do you feel, and when I say fear, I think that in our community we talk a lot about dysphoria, gender
Hmm.
dysphoria, and how much that guides you versus joy or euphoria.
Hmm.
Yeah, how do you feel like that shaped your journey?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't so, at least for me, it wasn't so much fear. I mean, yes, there was dysphoria because I didn't know, and I always say whenever I, tell my story, growing up in the 60s and in the 70s, all of that. And then what I did, I mean, I was a paramedic in the city, St. Vincent's Hospital in Greenwich Village, ground zero for the LGBT community for,
Yeah,
since the 60s, since the 50s plus.
totally.
And, even back then, nobody knew transgender. Nobody knew about gender dysphoria. Those were terms that were
Yeah.
not known. So, and I always say that, yes, even working there, it was, that these, I want, and not to put it badly, but these types of people, it was you
Yeah.
were a tranny, which meant that you
Yeah.
were a gay drag queen or a prostitute. And I'm like, I don't identify with either of those. So what am I?
Yeah.
You look in the mirror, and that's why I always say being transgender is an identity thing, because you
Hmm.
look in the mirror and what you see does not reflect how you feel. I should be something else. I always say also, it's, like if you look at in the penal system, in prisons, how
Hmm.
come prisoners have a
Yeah.
number? Well, for administrative purposes and blah, 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 like that whole thing. But there's the psychological aspect that if you take away somebody's identity, you've now
Yeah.
dropped them down. So you've taken away part of their power and everything. And that's it, is the identity. So I never had a fear of it. It was more of just a confusion.
Yeah. Yeah, I identify with that. I think for me, my journey started as a very, very small kernel of dysphoria that I sort of buried deep down inside, but it wasn't the primary feeling
Hmm.
that guided me forward or made me feel like there had to be a change. But that kernel or seed really grew over the course of many years and resulted in such a profound discomfort that I had some really dark times as I was trying to figure out not just how to move away from that feeling, but what I was actually moving towards. And the what am I moving towards question
Hmm.
was what I feel like was answered by engaging relentlessly with the community and searching for the different vernacular and vocabulary that I could use to even describe the feelings that I was having because the fluidity of my identity, I didn't really have something that felt like a fit. And it was finding things that worked for me that sparked a real feeling of joy or gender euphoria and being able to find things that I could do that really made me feel like I was fully inhabiting myself and living the life that I wanted to
Mm.
lead that is where I found that euphoria.
Hmm.
Like that is what really answered the question. Because I feel like there are always two parts of a journey. There's what you're moving away from and what you're trying to get to.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The one thing that really helped me was the network, the LGBT network. Because
Yeah, they're great.
I found them out, and then I started going to the light sessions, which back then, so 2000, I started there about 2015, going to these sessions and realizing that, yeah, I'm number one, I'm not the only one who feels
Hmm.
this way. So yes, there
Yeah.
is a community, and I'm accepted, even though I don't truly accept myself in
Yeah.
any place because I don't identify with anything. So that's it,
Yeah.
checking out resources, education, finding out, being part of a community, that's
It
something that we all
really
have to.
it helps to unpack the internalized misogyny, transphobia, like
Hmm.
for me, even if I didn't feel like it was valid, I had heard countless sort of, or at least like, the internet is not always a kind of space, and certainly not when you're queer. But I
Yeah,
had
it's the bathroom wall
read,
of the world. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I like that. I'm gonna borrow that. I had read or heard comments about, pink and blue haired weirdos who identify as 17 different genders
right.
and how like a person like that can't really also be a serious person. And I had to reconcile sort of the internalized message that I had taken on, whether I consciously realized it or not, with the serious and accomplished person who I actually am.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's work. That's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I know. It is. It is. And that's why we have to be together as a community and lead on each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so now,
Yeah.
speaking about a community, I mean, yes, we have our community. Um, Now, how about people that are outside of our community, allies? What can allies do, like real stuff, not just,
Yeah.
oh, my thoughts and prayers and like that and everything. I mean, we're talking about, somebody says, you know what, yeah, I really want to be an ally and help out. What can they do real time, every day, all of that stuff?
Can I approach this from both sort of like the micro lens and the macro lens?
Sure,
Is that
sure.
okay? Cool. So I think that there are ways that you can be an ally in your day-to-day life to the people who you know who are transgender in your world. A big part of that is being really disciplined in correctly gendering and using the preferred names of the people who you want to be an ally of. That's basic work. And it is work. It takes
Hmm.
actual practice. I've heard a few different methods that people use for pronouns, and I maybe one of these days you and I can have a separate video about that if it's not a topic that you've already covered.
Sure.
But there are little practices and exercises that you can do to be really disciplined and consistent about correctly gendering the people around you and honoring their experience. And when I say honoring their experience, I mean just like treating them with the same kind of human dignity that you would treat anyone. So, if you have a cisgender person in your life, somebody who's the same gender, who identifies as the same gender as they were assigned at birth, if you have a kid who wants to go by a nickname, it's not a major affront. It's not offensive to anybody. You call them
Right.
by the nickname. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's their new nickname. Um, that's the same kind of basic common courtesy. So that's foundational. Um, Past some of the basics like that, you should be guided by the person who you're trying to advocate for. So, for example, if this is a colleague, you might want to have an aside with that colleague about how you advocate for them when they are around and how you advocate for them when they are not around. The reason that you want to be really clear with them is one, you don't want to accidentally out them, whether they're in the closet or out of the closet. That's their business, and it's up to them to control how they want to exit the closet, and how much of a thing they want to make it, especially in the workplace.
Mm.
This is a time when you really need to be very pragmatic and go based off of the trans person in front of you and what they're comfortable with. And the reason that I'm emphasizing this so much is, you know, every workplace, and workplaces are the specific paradigm that I approach a lot of this with,
Yeah.
given my HR background, but every workplace is different. Every state is different with regards to what protections trans individuals and workers actually have, and whether or not their right to be regarded as themselves takes precedence in the workplace, and whether or not they're protected from discrimination. And I guarantee you they know how safe they are better than you do.
Mm.
So it's good for you to be educated on that and to know what your state's laws are, to know what your municipal laws are with regards to those protections. But ultimately, it comes down to that person's preference. So they may not want you to correct other people in meetings when they are misgendered,
Right.
or they might want you to speak up and say, hey, actually, it's he, him, she, her, they, them.
Hmm.
They may not want you to correct, but may want you to more subtly jump in and say, hey, she actually said this. Oh, I was talking to her yesterday, and
Right.
just sort of lay out the example rather than correcting people, since it can be off putting to some people. It's up to them,
Hmm.
is the point. So that's on sort of the micro level. On the macro level, I hate to make this all political, but right now our existence is political. That's
Yes.
just the reality of
Yes.
it. So if you want to be an ally, you need to vote. You need to activate locally. So remember how I was just talking about all of those laws and local ordinances about how trans people, trans students, trans workers are treated? I mean, those scenarios, those settings make up a huge amount of their lived experience because you spend like half of your waking time at school or at work,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So looking at what kinds of protections they're entitled to in those spaces and calling your representatives and your state senators and your mayors and your governors and saying, hey, this is something that matters to me. Right now, I know that this person is not entitled to protections, and I do not like that. I would like this person to be protected. Making those kinds of calls, getting involved in politics, that stuff really, really matters, especially on the local level.
Hmm.
Right now, we have school districts out on Long Island that are targeting single students
Yes.
for
Yeah.
their entire transgender policies. I mean, just imagine being that student. So if you consider yourself to be an ally, speak up on behalf of those who have fewer voices or smaller voices than your own, and you will join a collective that can be really, really impactful.
Hmm. Yeah.
So those would be my two sort of takes on that.
Great. I mean, yeah, that's fantastic. And right, with the elections, a lot of people feel, well, I'm going to vote for what? Governor and president. Those are the two
Yeah,
biggies. So those are the ones that
yeah.
count. No, the smaller, the school board elections, those
School
all
board is
matter.
huge.
It's huge.
School,
Library boards, school boards. Yes.
yes. And on the I just want to pause here for a note of good news, which is the last year of library and school board elections have seen an overwhelming swing of the pendulum back towards protecting LGBTQ
Yes.
texts and library materials. And if these are things that you feel really strongly should be available for students so that they can better understand the feelings that they're having, like we've been talking about, not rush into a decision, but really sort of have a full scope of what the wide range of human
Hmm.
experiences can look like, just to become a more empathetic human being or even to see themselves in those texts, then that's something that you need to activate on.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's fantastic. Fantastic point. And yeah, I think I did do one on pronouns, but it would be great to get your input from it. So we'll work on that.
Pronouns part two.
That's it. So now what's next for you?
Oh my goodness. Well, I am just coming off of the heels of a big event that we had with Disrupt HR Long Island, where
Yes.
I am the honorary MC at large.
You
So
did
if
a
you're ever
great
looking,
job. You did a
thank
great
you.
job.
It was so much fun. It was so much fun. We had an incredible panel of speakers. So, anybody who's in the HR community or even adjacent to the HR community, you can catch those events and see when they're coming up on the Disrupt HR Long Island and Disrupt HR NYC pages on LinkedIn. We have a few events every year, and it's a really, really cool kind of format. The vibes are fun.
Hmm.
It's not, tied up. And I mean, I love me some Jackson Lewis. I
Yes.
love me some Sherm Long Island, but they're not the entire scope of what we have available to us. And Disrupt HR really captures the fun elements. So I'm heavily involved in both of those
Hmm.
groups, both on Long Island and NYC. So you can check me out there. You can also check me out at the Funny People Comedy Hour hosted by Peter Phelan. I'm going to do a Type 5 comedy set tonight. So probably a little late it'll be a little late by the time this is published, but it's always great fun. He's a great guy. And then, of course, in my consulting business,
Hmm.
so I run a little company called Culture Catalyst, where I do HR consulting for especially LGBTQ leaders and CEOs, leadership coaching. Basically, the concept that I started with is that every CEO starts off wanting to create a workplace culture that they always wanted to work in. And somewhere along the lines of scaling and business realities, the vision and the reality start to separate. So I help leaders diagnose the problem and create strategies to bring that reality and vision back together.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's something that is desperately needed. And I know a lot of companies, because you were at the workplace summit that we had at the network. I mean, there were over 50 different companies represented there, that they are hungry for information. They are hungry to
Yes.
know, even though, yes, that macro lens that you used before with the politics and everything, all of that that's going on, companies still want to know and they want to understand. So that's fantastic.
Do we have time for like one other quick anecdote or do we have
Sure.
to sign off? Okay. So one other quick story before we end today. I remember a few years ago at this point, I was listening to a talk by a Mormon feminist, and she was talking about the various things that she was doing in her community, in the Mormon community that she belonged to champion women's rights in the church.
Mm,
And at one point, she was asked the question, why don't you just leave? If you are in a place that is so problematic and is harmful to the women of your community, why don't you exit the church? And her answer to that was, the church is what I know. And part of knowing it is knowing how to influence it.
mm,
And so I enact change that will impact my own community in the place that I am most familiar with. So if you are familiar with a church or religious institution, a community center, a company, these are all places where you can enact and create change that welcomes people of all different stripes and backgrounds.
hmm Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. Thank you for that. And thank you for coming on again. I really appreciate this part two. I really appreciate you so much.
Oh, I appreciate you too, Tammy. Your voice is so important here. It really,
Uh,
really is.
Thank you. Thank you, Mel. And so I will, just like I did on the previous video, have your contact information, your company's website, down in the description for anybody that wants to reach out. I'll put your
Yeah.
LinkedIn down there. So if anybody
Set
wants
time
to
with
reach
me.
out.
My calendar is like literally always available. So just grab a slot and you can talk to me anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, thank you so much and have a fantastic Hanukkah and holiday season.
Thank you.
Yeah.